Okay. So I have some really difficult windshield wipers on my car. Can never figure out how to get them on. I was in a rainstorm, had to replace them, and I was struggling to get them replaced. And some nice young man just across the parking lot came over and fixed it on for me. It was all. I'm sorry, that's so bad.
No, it's great. Keep going.
Anyway, so that lasted a few months, and then there was a crazy storm again and kind of blew the windshield wiper off of my car. I could not figure out how to get it fixed. Snowing. And another nice man who I've never seen before, who was just at the bank for the day, came over and fixed it for me again. So thanks to two nice strangers, I was able to see on my way home.
So I'm a teacher at a charter school, teach middle school, which is kind of tough sometimes, but I was having a particularly bad week with kids, and one of my coworkers decided to boost my morale a little, and I went to my office mailbox and she left me this note that said, "Hey you, I love that you're my coworker, and I love you, Mets." And I keep this with me now. Just took 2 seconds of her time and made all the difference for me.
That's totally cool. Can you hold it up? I can get a little shot of it.
Okay. So when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my parents took me to this great big mall out in the suburbs, and it was the holiday season. So of course they had a Santa land set up with all these little animatronic penguins that would move around and make snowmen or whatever animatronic penguins do in a Santa land display. And of course, as a kid, I wanted to get a closer look at them, so I ran over to a different part of the display to take a look at them. And when I turned back around, my parents were nowhere to be found. And so I wandered around a little bit. And so I remember that this young couple came by, and a man and a woman, and they asked me what had happened, if I was lost, and they asked if I wanted to go with them. So they took me by the hand and they led me through the mall. And I remember for some reason that the man, that the boyfriend or the husband of this duo, had wanted to go to a shoe store on the way, and his wife or girlfriend said, "No, not now, we've got to keep going." So he wasn't able to buy shoes. But they led me through the mall, and they led me to the security desk of the mall, where my mom was waiting for me, frantic, looking for if anybody had turned a child in. And so, you know, to this couple, I'm appreciative in a couple of ways. One is that I'm glad that the man did not stop to buy shoes, and it got me to my mom sooner. Second of all, that they did the right thing and turned me into the security desk. And third, I just want to say thank you for not kidnapping me.
I was living and working in Aspen, Colorado, and I got a call at work from my brother Mark, and he said, "You gotta come home, Dad's dying." And I hurried up and packed up my car and got on the road, and it was getting dark, and I was coming down the mountain, and I got a flat tire, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I got out, and I knew I could do it. I was just already a mess because of my dad. But I started changing the tire, and I got the first lug nut off. And here comes a man walking down the road with another jack. And I thought, what's he going to be doing? He came over, didn't say a word, just changed my tire, and wouldn't accept any money, wouldn't. All he accepted was, "Thank you so much." And then he walked away. And then about an hour later, I made it to Greeley. And the weird thing about it was, when I got there, my mom greeted me, and my father had passed away. And so she told me that. And I go, "When did that happen?" And she said, "About an hour ago." And I really believe that that man was sent by my father to come and help me. Or it was my father, I'm not sure.
When I was 20 years old, I had my first baby, which was born quite early and died. And I was very upset, and it was really a tragedy for me. I went to visit a friend of mine who was from Libya, and his wife had just come over from Libya to join him. And I was telling him the story because he knew my situation and he was a good friend. And I was talking to him in English, of course. His wife didn't speak any English. But I was telling him about that I had lost this baby and how upset I was. And he turned to his wife and he said a couple of words in Arabic, just a couple of words, and she ran out of the room, ran upstairs and came back down with her baby and put her baby in my arms. And I held the baby and really helped me. That's it.
I was in high school, 10th grade, and I was in this AP class, advanced placement, and I had no business being in there, but I was trying to get through it just to get the trip. You get a trip at the end of the class to go to Washington, and it's more so geared towards kids that are wanting to be constitutional scholars. Push came to shove. We had our first big, I guess it was trial or something. It was like a mock trial. You'd sit there with the kids in the front, and a bunch of real judges, real politicians, real, political people. And they'd ask you questions based on your project that you were each working on. I totally bombed it. I didn't speak once. I felt nervous. I didn't know the information. The teacher was just glaring me down with like the worst look on earth, and I was just losing it afterwards on the bus ride out. And I was like breaking down into tears that I didn't belong there, and none of the kids liked me, and I should have just never even done the class. But this kid came up to me, and he just sat next to me, and he saw I was like kind of sobbing. He gave me a little nudge, trying to like get some laughs out of me, which he did, and he's like, "Don't worry about this shit, it's not a big deal." But I was a valued member of the team, I guess, and he gave me this this feeling like I actually belonged and like I could keep going. And when he did that, I was more eager to like participate and show my worth. It felt like more like a sports team or some sort of team combined effort that I could actually contribute to. So lo and behold, that night back at the hotel, everybody else is watching TV and partying and stuff, so I stayed there, read a couple of the pages of the guy's stuff, read some more stuff from my other teammates, and it was all because of this kid being randomly nice. And I thought he was like a prep, and I thought he was this like douchebag prep kind of kid who wouldn't do anything to help anybody, rich dad, great car, all that stuff. But he had a really nice soul. He was really nice to me, hung out with me, whereas the other kids kind of shunned me the whole time, and it was a really good feeling. So I think we came in 14th in the nation, which 50 states, 14. That's not so bad. That's not so bad at all, but. He got me through that tough time. And
What would you say to him if he was sitting in front of you right now?
are you still wearing the same preppy high school outfit? Nah, he probably is. But no, I'd say to him, thanks. Thank you so much for, being a decent person, being a friend, breaking that gap between, the cool kids and me, the loner who didn't really fit in that well. I'd say thank you for that, and let's grab a beer. I owe you a beer.
When I was in law school, I had this kind of clunker Saturn that I bought when I was in high school, actually. And it's funny that I say clunker, it had nothing to do with it. I ran out of gas. And it was raining out. I had maybe a mile and a half to the closest gas station, got to the side of the road, got out and started walking. Somebody pulled over. And of course I was a little bit scared to have a stranger approach me. And he said, "Is that your Saturn back there?" And I said, "Yes. I'm just going to walk to a gas station and buy a can." He said, "Just wait right here." Apparently he went up, bought a plastic can, came back. I was still walking. I saw him, and he waved me down, and he went and put, a gallon or two of gas into my Saturn, and I tried to give him money, and he said, "Absolutely not," and he left, and I don't know his name. But it was like a combination of respecting the fact that I was scared, and he didn't ask me to get in his car. He just said, "Is that your car back there?" And then he went and got the gas and came back.
I was stationed in Iraq, and my captain, a man who I had a ton of respect for, did a wonderful thing for me. So I was supposed to fly home on leave because my first son Thomas was about to be born. So my wife and I found out we were pregnant shortly before I got deployed, and was going to go home and see the birth. And about 3 days prior to me departing, things got pretty heated, and they shut down all passes and said no one leaves. And so I was heartbroken. Didn't know what was going to happen because I really wanted to be home to see my first child born.
Yeah.
And so anyway, the captain said, I've got this memo. It says that they're shutting down all passes. I'm going to pretend that I didn't see it. Go. See if you can get to the airport. See if you can, get on a military flight to Kuwait City and see if you can get home. So anyway, I get to Kuwait City, to the military base where it's a commercial. They have commercial airlines there, and I was shot down. They said nope, you can't do it. There's strict orders. They don't want anybody flying in or out. There's just too much stuff going on, and so the gentleman there just asked why I was going home or why I wanted to, and I told him, and I could see it on his face. He wanted to do anything he could. So he said, I'm going to stamp your paperwork medical, and we're going to get you out of here, which was phenomenal because then I was able to go home.
I was in the hospital about to give birth to him 2.5 months early, and I just felt like everything I had planned for him to be born in October was gone out the window. And one of the things I really wanted was to have a birth photographer, and it was just something that was really important to me, and it was something that before I went into the hospital I was actually going to set up to get that all scheduled. Well, I had mentioned that to one of the medical students, just not thinking anything else of it. And then right after I ended up having a C-section with him, she comes in the next day and she's pulls out her phone and she's like, I hope this is okay, but I took pictures of your birth for you, and I know I didn't ask, but that was just so special to me because I would have lost those moments because I was put under anesthesia and I didn't get to see him be born. So afterwards I was able to see pictures of his birth, which I'll keep forever. So that was amazing, and we're still friends with her to this day, so it was very, very cool. Yep.
When I was in college, my senior year, I had a friend who passed away, and so I had to fly from Vermont to Alaska, and my dad was a pilot, so I flew standby, which meant I could get bumped on any flight and never really knew how I was going to get from point A to point B. So on my way back to college, I was flying from Fairbanks to, and then I got, like, all of a sudden flights got really full, but I was trapped in Seattle, so all my bags went to Boston, and so then, but the only flight I could get on went to Newark, New Jersey. And so I'm sitting on the plane frantically on my phone trying to figure out how I would get from Newark to Boston. And so when I got there, I was like, 19 or 20 years old, and I was like looking at the train schedule, and I was going to figure it out eventually. But this couple, husband and wife, comes up and they're like, we heard you on the plane. Like, do you need any help? And I was like, I have to get to all my bags to get to Boston, or all my bags are in Boston. And so they were like, well, we're going to Boston, we'll just take you there. So I went with them to rent their car, and so I went for 3 hours in their car. They stopped, they bought me dinner, and then we went all the way to Boston. They dropped me off at the train station. And it was like, I don't remember at all who they were, but I just, like, at this time they saved me because they were like eavesdropping, and then they ended up taking me on their 3-hour car trip.
Many years ago I was on the road with my band, and we were out west somewhere, I don't remember where, and we had done, I think, 3 or 4 nights in a row. We had played at a venue, and I went and got paid while the band was loading up the truck, and it was $1,600, and I put it in cash, and I put it in a little bank bag, and I set it on the bumper of the truck just while I checked the lock to make sure the lock was secure on the truck, and I didn't pick it up again. And so I took off in the truck with that bank bag with $1,600 in it. And I don't remember exactly when, but my mom called. I think it was that night, maybe when we got to the next motel, and I don't think I had even noticed it missing yet. And my mom called and said that a lady called and said she had found $1,600 in a bank bag in a parking lot, because luckily I had had her address and her phone number written on the bank bag. And so my mom called me, and then she connected me with the lady, and then the lady sent it overnight to the motel we were at, and we got our money back. And if I didn't have that money, I wouldn't have had gas money, motel money. I wouldn't have been able to pay anybody for the week. We would have had no money for the next upcoming week, and we were out on the road somewhere, so that really saved us.
Okay, so this was about a little over 4 years ago, and while I was driving, my front hood popped open and smashed the window, and I was freaking out, and so I was in the left lane, and miraculously I somehow got over in that little tiny side that's on the left where you're not supposed to stop. It's not on the right where all the cars are going this way. And I was totally panicking and shaking, and then I kind of sit there, and then this man stands next to me and says, "Oh my God, are you okay?" He had obviously been driving the opposite direction and saw it, and I guess he stopped on his right side and then crossed the major road to check and see if I was okay. I mean, most people would have just called, they might have called the cops or something, or expected I would, because I would have had a cell phone. But it was so awesome because I felt like he was so thoughtful, and I think he might have stayed there for a little while, just kind of right over the median, making sure I was safe.
So my girlfriend Jenny had just bought a house in Englewood. First night in the house, we're moving in boxes, we're getting situated, and she has a dog named Forrest. And she's only had Forrest for about a year. So as I'm coming from the car into the house, I leave the door slightly ajar. For those of you at home, kids, that's open. And he got out. And it was absolutely, positively terrifying, because if you chase him, he runs even harder and faster. He is the type of dog that needs to be on a leash. He thinks it's a fun game. He's crossing over major streets. So Jenny takes off on foot, chasing him. He's so fast, I get in the car. I start circling blocks, looking for them. They're 4 blocks over at this point in time. This guy in a white pickup truck stops his car in the middle of the street, engine running, doors open, grabs his dog who's on a leash, sees that we're in complete utter distress, and helps us. He must have spent the next 10 minutes with his dog trying to wrangle Forrest back in. And finally, after me begging and pleading, "Please, sir, don't give up on us, please help us," he is able to coerce Forrest over to his dog, and Jenny's able to grab him. We throw him in the car, and I just had minutes, seconds to say thank you to this Good Samaritan. And I would have bought him a new car, I would have bought him a new house. He basically saved Forrest's life.
I was traveling. I was 16, and I was driving a car back and forth from South Dakota to Minnesota for a summer job at a summer camp. And I was driving every weekend by myself, 6 hours each direction, because they didn't have anywhere for me to stay on the weekends. And out in the middle of nowhere, between some farms in Minnesota, I suddenly lost my tire. I heard my tire blow and ended up in the ditch. And my tire somehow was just shredded. To this day, I'm not entirely sure how it happens, because there was a hole through the sidewall of my tire. So something shot in my tire. I really don't know. There was no one around, and some guy in a minivan just stops on the highway. The only other car I'd seen probably for half an hour while I'd been sitting there trying to figure out what to do. And of course, this is the 90s. I didn't have a cell phone. So he found my spare, put it on, and then asked how far I had to drive. And I told him I still had another 3 hours to drive to my job. And he goes, "You can't drive that far on a donut. You need a tire." And at this time, it's starting to get dark. It's the evening. And he was like, "Well, I know a place. I'll call these guys so that you can stop in this next town over and get a tire." And so, okay. So he told me how to get there. He wrote out directions for me on a notepad. I was like, "Why are you being so nice to me?" He's like, "Well, if you were my daughter on the side of the road, I'd want somebody to help you too." I drove down the highway about half an hour and I got to this town. And everything looked totally closed. And I drove up to the shop and there was just one guy sitting outside of the shop leaning against a truck. And he goes, "Okay, Phil called. He said to stay open so I could get you a tire. Come on in." And so this guy had stayed late waiting for some strange girl to drive down the highway. And I go in and he put a new tire on my car. And I pulled out my emergency credit card that I was prepared with to try to pay for it. And he goes, "Nope, it's already taken care of." So some gentleman named Phil had paid for my tire.
Love, joy, peace, patience.